All right, nobody's allowed to sit in those back 4 rows, so the four chair tables. So if you're coming in, you have to sit at one of these 3 rows. Yeah, this is going to be an interactive session, so there will become a time where you sit around the people at your table and talk about solutions and questions and problems. So let us first very quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Martha Nance. I'm a neurologist and geneticist in Minnesota.
My name is Mara Sifri, and I am a genetic counselor. I am the coordinator for the Kaiser Permanente clinic in Sacramento. Been doing this work about 20 years, and I also work at UC Davis as the genetic counselor doing predictive testing there. And our goal today really is not for us to be experts up here, because we don't feel like we are. We really want to sort of help encourage discussion and problem solve and think about ways to help the HD community getting our patients cared for after they do predictive testing and before they show up in a crisis.
So quickly, who are all of you?
Hi everybody, I'm Kristen Keys. I'm the Chief of Staff at HSG, and I'm your dedicated mic runner for this session.
Hey Kristen, my name's Lisa. I am a patient advocate with Teva. Hey everyone.
This is Stacy Barton. I'm the social worker in the clinic at WashU in St. Louis.
My name is Amy Lemke, and I am the clinic coordinator and clinical social worker at the University of Iowa.
Hi, I'm Amy Ogilvie. I am a postdoc research fellow at the University of Colorado.
Hi, I'm Susan Conrad. I'm a research patient at University of Cincinnati.
I'm Caitlin DeJarnett. I'm one of the social workers at the University of Cincinnati Center of Excellence.
I'm Becca Ganous, and I'm also a social worker at UC.
I'm Bobby Stubman, and I'm a research coordinator at the University of Cincinnati.
Thank you. This is cool to hear where everybody's from. I like this.
Hello, I'm Claire Gibbons, and I'm previously genetic counselor, now research manager at North York General in Toronto.
I'm Erin Patterson, and I'm a family member and patient advocate for HD from Toronto, Ontario.
Hello, I'm Keith Nguyen, and I'm a medical liaison with Teva Pharmaceuticals, a pharmacist by training.
I'm Meredith Pauley. I'm a speech-language pathologist from Philadelphia, PA.
I'm Nicole Vredos. I'm clinical research manager at The Ohio State University.
Hi, I'm Pamela Nab. I'm the staff accountant at HSG.
I'm Katie Moore. I'm a neurologist at Duke University.
I'm Julie Stout. I'm a psychologist, clinical neuropsychologist, and clinical psychologist at Monash University in Melbourne.
Hi everyone, I'm Bonnie Hennig-Tressman. I'm a director of the Huntington's Disease Program in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm the special program director at HD Reach, and I'm on the board of directors at HDYO as a clinical chair, co-chair.
Hi everyone, my name is Kathy Gallagher. I'm on the Austedo team at Teva Pharmaceuticals.
Hi, I'm Alicia Leader, and I'm a research coordinator at Albany Medical.
Hi, I'm Karen Hildebrand, research coordinator at Beth Israel in Boston.
Hi, I'm Melissa Amante. I'm the clinical coordinator at Beth Israel in Boston.
Hi, I'm Katie Gilretti. I'm also a research coordinator at the University of Michigan.
I'm Margie Rockwood, and I'm a freelance medical writer, and I put HD Insights together.
Hi, I'm Etta Bernard, and I'm a research coordinator at Johns Hopkins University.
Hi, I'm Susan Robinson, and I'm the research manager at Johns Hopkins.
This is the Hopkins table. Hi, I'm Angela Chaco. I'm the social worker at Johns Hopkins.
Hi, I'm Hadley Bryan. I'm a postdoc at the NIH and also a genetic counseling student at Johns Hopkins.
Guess what I am not. So I'm Rebecca Camshaw. I'm a fourth-year neurology resident at Hopkins and soon to be movement disorders fellow at Hopkins.
I'm Amy Hellman. I am a neurologist and the director of the HDSA Center of Excellence at the University of Nebraska.
Hi, Anna Savage. I work in clinical operations at Spark Therapeutics.
Hello, my name is Serena Cupara. I'm a speech language pathologist at the University of Iowa.
Good afternoon, Hans Nettesheim, Study Coordinator, UNC Chapel Hill. Go Heels.
Hi, I'm Kendra Fowler. I'm a research coordinator at University of Utah.
Hello, I'm Pat Weigel from the University of Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. And I am a nurse research coordinator.
And I'm Kelly Andrzejewski. I'm the director of the HDSA Center of Excellence at University at Buffalo and director of our HD clinic.
I'm Kelly Watson. I'm a clinical psychologist at Vanderbilt.
Hi, I'm Catherine McDonald. I'm a neurologist at Vanderbilt.
Liz Key, research coordinator at Vanderbilt, and I will be applying for genetic counseling in December.
I'm Danielle Buchanan, research coordinator at Vanderbilt University.
I'm Brandon. I'm also a research coordinator at Vanderbilt University.
I'm Tiara Willis, the project manager at Vanderbilt.
This is the Vanderbilt table. I'm Isabel. I'm also a research coordinator at Vanderbilt.
I'm Kara Turkington. I'm a research coordinator at the University of Iowa.
Hi, my name is Shana Ward, and I'm a clinical research coordinator at the Children's Hospital Philadelphia for the Change HD study.
Hi, I'm David Moser. I'm a neuropsychologist at the University of Iowa.
Hi, I'm Ann Van Dusen. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at HSG and a big fan of Martha and dragonflies.
I'm Elena. I'm a physical therapist at Johns Hopkins.
Oh, no wonder
Okay,
you're
she's-
at that table.
Did anybody else come in late? This gentleman did.
Hello, Evan Gronzik, CHDI, stats and modeling.
Anybody else not speak yet? Oh, good. Okay. All right. So, the title of this talk is, you have the clicker, right? HD care after predictive testing. Next. Disclosures.
None.
Yeah.
Oh, she has a couple.
Yeah, whatever it says there. Okay. Next.
Don't ask questions. Ask questions using the mic. Okay, this is just how we're going to spend our time together. As you can sort of tell, this is not your typical scientific session at HSG. We're going to have a lot more interaction. There's going to be more communication. Right now, we're going to start with just kind of describing the current predictive testing models at our sites. Everyone's going to have a different model that we recognize. We're going to identify some issues around losing contact with patients after they do their predictive testing. We're going to brainstorm some ideas to help with the continuity of care, and maybe in this conversation start rethinking how we do predictive testing and how we model things after we give people results to improve, patient engagement. This is you.
So I will start. So how do we do predictive HD testing at Hennepin Healthcare in Minnesota? And this looks complicated, but it really is not as complicated as it seems. So on the left side, somebody calls to the center, and whoever answers the phone, the person says, I'm interested in genetic testing for Huntington's disease. That call gets routed to the genetic counselor who initiates contact. There are kind of four possible things that it turns out that the patient wants when the genetic counselor talks to them. One is that they are sort of worried about symptoms that they're having. One would be that they don't have concern about symptoms, but they just sort of want to talk. They just sort of want information. Or they have no concern about symptoms, but they think they want to have predictive genetic testing. So if there's any concern about symptoms, those people get directed to the neurologist, because that's what neurologists do, is talk about your symptoms, do an exam, see whether we can identify what the problem is. So those would be referred to the neurologist. That's the dark blue. Somebody who just wants information, and you've all seen those folks. They talk, you have to have a hook to even get connected to an actual provider. But they really just want to talk about Huntington's disease, or they want to talk about what the procedures are for predictive testing, or they just want information about genetics. So the counselor talks to them, and that's it, and that's all they want, and that's what they got. That's the green thing. And then there are the people who want to proceed with testing. So what happens next? In our center, they would have a formal genetic counseling appointment, which often goes for an hour and a half, to do all the things that a genetic counselor is trained to do. Talk about sort of genetics of Huntington's disease. That's part of it. What about your family history? How do we actually even know that Huntington's disease is the disease that runs in your family? And then the whole other piece of genetic counseling is, you know, where are you at in your life? Why do you want this? Who's there to support you? All the things you can talk about better than I can. So long session with the genetic counselor. Our genetic counselor, since the COVID era, is pretty much always doing appointments by video. At our center, our folks will also meet either by video or in person with our social worker, who's familiar with the impact of genetics and genetic testing in HD families. So she will also meet with the person. And then a couple things happen before the next block down, which is they come to see me. So number one, at all points along the way, sometimes patients don't show up for whatever's next, which is fine. We have people who may do that for years. They call, they come for an appointment, they don't come back. And then 3 years later, they call again. All this is fine. If they don't want to proceed, they don't have to. We also have a conversation, the genetic counselor, social worker, me. Was there anything weird that came up in the discussions? And even those of us who've been doing Huntington's disease for 35 years, weird things, you know, every year you get weird genetic testing cases. Are there any red flags? I really rail at the use of the word protocol. I think of it as a process. You do something by protocol, it kind of implies that there should be no deviation from the protocol, because that's the protocol. What we really want to do is help people make the right decision about whether to proceed with predictive testing. So I also like, therefore, to insert time between that lengthy conversation with the genetic counselor, the conversation with the social worker. These are not little kiosks that you walk past on your way to the laboratory. There's a reason for the conversations, and sometimes it raises questions or things they didn't know or they misunderstood. Or so I like for time to pass between those conversations and the day you get your blood drawn. So they come to get their blood drawn. We've worked very hard with our lab. We have our university laboratory does the genetic testing. They get results back in 2 weeks. So the appointments are scheduled for the person to come back in 2 weeks, not 2 months, not 1 month, 2 weeks. When you have your blood drawn, it's kind of like you took a step off the cliff and you're not quite sure how far down it's going to be. People do not need to be in that limbo any longer than possible. Typically, we do the results in person. Typically, historically, it's been the genetic counselor and me in the room. And then if somebody's sick or on vacation or whatever, it may be one or the other, but not both. What do we say? I usually say, come get a neuro exam if you test positive. They say, well, what do I do next? Well, come get a neuro exam when you're ready to have sort of a baseline, or enroll in Enroll, which kind of almost serves that same purpose of getting a baseline exam. And we give general information about HGSA and local chapter, and here's a packet, and so on. The genetic counselor then initiates a phone call a week after the results to touch base again. And I think she'll try, I forget if it's 2 or 3 times, to call a person. And if they're not answering the phone, we're done. So that has been our predictive testing process in the past.
Okay, I don't have a slide for the UC Davis program, but it's very much like this, except that I don't work at UC Davis full time, so the person who actually does the intake conversation is Lisa Mooney, our amazing social worker, and she does all the things that a genetic counselor would do kind of in that first conversation. And then when they show up at clinic, they actually see all of us in a row, boom, boom, boom. You know, they see me first for genetic counseling, again, about an hour and a half, if I'm doing well. Sometimes can be longer if people have lots of questions. And then they meet with Lisa also, and we kind of think about it like we're loosening the pickle jar, you know, as we're handing this person off down these providers, because invariably people will say something even more, you know, evocative or more, or more in depth to Lisa. And then last but not least, we have our movement disorder neurologists that also go in, perform a neuro exam to 99.8% of the people. I've had a handful that have declined that over the years. And that first visit is always in person because our lab is in the building and we have yet to figure out how to navigate that with the video visits. But we are doing results disclosures on video, usually a little longer than you. We've had that happen where families showed up from out of town and we didn't have the results, so now we err on the other side. And that's the UC Davis model. It's very much like the HDSA recommendations. Where I have kind of got a little rogue is my role at Kaiser, where I've worked for 30 years and I run the HD program there, and they asked me to develop a predictive testing program. After COVID, when there wasn't any action, let's just say, from HDSA in terms of actually getting new recommendations. So I did go a little rogue, and I created a program for our team where we call these things pre-intakes, the part where the person just talks, you know, has lots of questions about testing. We don't even really put anything in the chart, just a really vague note. And at that time, we can discern, okay, are you interested in testing through Kaiser, where everything's going to be in your chart, or are you interested in anonymous testing, where you may want to think about going to UC Davis, where they have anonymous testing, or HD Genetics, you know, Wes and BJ's company. And if they want to go that route, clearly that's the path on the far side. If they're, again, like Martha was saying, having symptoms, that's a slightly different path. You know, we don't have neurologists. This is through the Department of Genetics. So we send them to neurology if they want to get a neuro evaluation at that point with their symptoms. Sometimes our geneticists also will act in that role and sort of say, okay, I'm trained, our geneticists all work in our HD clinic, so they've seen enough to feel like, okay, I can probably say this looks like HD symptoms, yes, we'll go ahead and order the test. But then for the predictive arm, where people don't have symptoms or they aren't aware that they have symptoms, they may be very symptomatic but not in that mindset that they have anosognosia going on. Then we kind of do further genetic counseling, and in the next session, the genetic counselor actually does a PHQ-9 and the Columbia Suicide Rating Scale, a mini version. And if either of those things come out elevated, then they go to our social worker. We've kind of bypassed that piece. Now, if it's somebody, and you know, we've done this work, right? You know the families where they seem pretty solid, they're probably going to be okay. The genetic counselor can just manage this with or without. They can include a social worker if they want to, and they certainly can include the geneticist if they want to. But we really have given genetic counselors a lot of autonomy. Who wrote this protocol? A genetic counselor. So, and I do feel like, you know, after Martha and I have been really fortunate to get to be, like, I don't know what you call us, mentors to Wes and BJ and their company. And watching Wes do, you know, 275 tests over the last 2 years, he's really fine without all the other pieces. You know what I mean? Like, people are doing fine. Talking to Claire earlier about it would be great to have the data, you know, once these people have gone out a little while, how, you know, finding out how people really do. Story for another day, though. And then the part that we're going to think and talk about today is, you know, what do I do after I give positive results? We reach out, just like she did. I don't harass people, though. Again, I don't call them more than 3 times. If they don't want to talk to me, I don't keep hounding them. Sounds like Wes has had some luck with having people book their post-clinic conversation when they book their results disclosure. She says they don't always show up, but at least he got the appointment booked. So that's just another food for thought. And then since I run the Huntington's program, these people, if they test positive, they show up in my clinic, right? So I get to follow them that way. Should I just jump into cases, or you have more to add with that?
So the question is, what's wrong with this? What do we miss in these approaches to predictive testing? And just to, again, neither of us believes that what we do is right or perfect, or it's just what we've fallen into for whatever reason. And we're just going to present a couple of cases of things that didn't go so well, and just use that as kind of fuel for thought as we make you guys talk about, is there another way to do this? Should we be doing something more or different? But let's do the cases.
Well, for those of you who were in Dr. McDonald's session this morning, she kind of stole all the thunder. She presented all the cases. And so I actually had a third one on here. We're taking it out. We don't need to. We get the idea. But in this case, Jill is a 44-year-old woman with 47 repeats. She had tested when she was quite a young woman. She presented, and she didn't do any HD care. Interestingly enough, her family's very involved in HDSA, but she herself didn't do any HD care. It was, I don't know, too fearful or something for her. But she did do PGD and has a healthy son who's HD free. But then she presented in 2020 with a crisis at work. She was an attorney, and she was suddenly struggling, trying to figure out how to keep up with her caseload and be a mom and the things that she was trying to do. She has some we did neuropsych testing at her first clinic visit. She had the typical mild neurocognitive deficits due to Huntington's disease. And she decided then, at that point, that was enough information for her to step away and just raise her child. She now attends her regular clinic visits, participates in research, but had never been aware of the Enroll HD study before the 2020 crisis, even though she was involved in HDSA. And this is kind of a good example, if you will, right? This is someone who had her child, she's been working, nothing really hit the fan here. But it's, as you know, in HD, things can get worse. So here's Martin, and he's a 29-year-old man who wanted to be tested. He had to know. The anxiety of not knowing, as many of these people say, is making them, keeping him from living his life fully. He had a sister who kind of accompanied him, which, I always love that, but she was tested negative. He was on a softball team. He had a good job at FedEx or UPS or one of those kinds of companies. He shared when he talked to us that he was scared about getting involved with anybody, like having any kind of intimate relationship, even close friendships, let alone any kind of romantic relationship. And he said he often just felt weird talking to people. He wasn't sure what that was about. And he wasn't yet at a place where he was really thinking about kids, and he didn't know if this would impact his decision or not. So, of course, he tests positive, as these stories go, right? We invited him to research. The social worker and I both called in, checked on him at 2 weeks and 2 months after. He was doing okay. About 3 years later, because we lost him, his sister reached out that Martin was behaving poorly, making very poor decisions. He was getting written up at work. He wasn't willing to come in for care and had a lot of anosognosia. He thought he was just fine. 1 year later, after this phone call, which we still didn't get him in, he showed up at the ED when he had an episode at work where he was throwing the packages against the wall and yelling at his colleagues. And they actually ended up having to call 911. And he also had a 1-year-old child that he had nothing to do with, essentially. He wasn't helping parent. He had, in his chart, you could see he had sexually transmitted diseases he was being treated for. He was alienated from his sister, who had accompanied him previously. And, when you ask him what he was doing, he was watching porn and TV. That was all he was doing with his spare time. And so this is, so sad. This is a sad example. And they can get worse, right? The other case I had on here was about someone who ended up, showing up in pretty severe disease and ended up then staying at UC Davis in the hospital for like 2 years because they couldn't find placement. And so this is kind of presenting the problem. You all have these cases. Every one of this, can talk to us about these cases. So this is just to kind of get the blood flowing, thinking about these a little bit. Why don't you go from here?
So you must have taken out the other slide. So the slide in between said, can we do more at the time of predictive testing? And then the answer is, we can do more at the time of predictive testing. Why should we be doing more? So these are examples where the people just sort of fell through the cracks. I get it. Some patients are going to do that no matter how lovingly you try to hold on to them. They're going to fall through the cracks or not want to be contacted or not show up. But should we be doing more than I am in my protocol or you are in yours to up front to maintain a connection to these people? Why would you want to do that? Well, number one, just to have an enduring contact. This is not a one and done. You get your testing and then we never see you again. We are going to see you again if you test positive. So let's make a connection now. Number two is most of our patients do fine psychologically, but it's kind of nice to just verify that. And moods ebb and flow over time, and I think we don't necessarily have a good feel for how people's psychological adjustment to the test results might ebb and flow over time, because we see people and we give them the results, and then we see them 5 years later when they're symptomatic. To facilitate timely clinical intervention and support. So, if you're having a little symptom, let's talk about it before it becomes a crisis. If you have that ongoing relationship, it really is easier for the person to come back. And then the other big thing, obviously, we're here at the HSG meeting. This is the research consortium. We are now heavily into designing clinical trials around these ISS stage 1 and 2 people who do not yet have diagnosable symptomatic HD. And Amy, you know as well as I do, they don't show up in your clinic as a neurologist until they're symptomatic, and usually even then they don't show up until they're symptomatic and in a crisis. And when they're symptomatic and in a crisis, number one, you got the crisis to deal with. Number two, they may be too far down the course with their disease to enroll in all these marvelous clinical trials that we're coming up with. So there really is a need from the research perspective to connect with these people on an ongoing basis. I have not done that in the past. I've been very passive about, call me if there's a problem, come back if you feel like, but I'm not going to require you to come back every year. Maybe you won't get symptoms for 40 years, so why would I see you every year? So I've been very passive, and I think we need to change that. So the next slide is. So the next slide is, the reason you're all sitting at tables together is because I want you guys to talk to each other. And Amy, you're going to have to move because you're at a table by yourself. So specific questions, and we have such a diverse group of people here, it's kind of cool. Do some, all, none of the predictive testing patients wherever you're at, or if you're a patient, did you have ongoing contact with somebody, your HD clinic in some fashion after testing? If so, in what format? Who did you connect with? Did you have follow-up appointments with the genetic counselor for years? It's 100 years ago. Andrea Zanko at UCFF used to. She was the one who did all the support groups for years. She was the genetic counselor. And there are some centers, as you already described, where the genetic testing is done over here, and the clinic is over here, and there's essentially no connection between the two. So how do you If you're in the genetic counseling place, how do you connect with the clinic? Or are you all in the same room together? So that's one specific question to answer. And if you are somebody who doesn't know the answer, if you're one of these Hopkins or Nashville people, hopefully there's somebody at your table who does know the answer to the question, because no matter who you are, what you're doing at Vanderbilt or at Hopkins, you should know the answer to these questions. You're part of the team. Number two, whose role is it to increase the connection between pre-symptomatic, predictively tested patients and the clinic, the patient community, the research community? Whose job is that? And then number three, what are your ideas? What are you going to do to make this better? Does that make sense?
The goal here is that we were thinking that, obviously we're patient-centric too. We want to make this better for our patients so they don't show up in crisis and their families. But also being at HSG, we were like, this is a research community too, and the research community wants our early onset patients, right? They want to find people earlier in their disease process. So just think brainstorming, coming up with ideas that we can kind of put forward to the powers that be here at HSG also to help them with their mission.
So please assign somebody at your table to be the scribe, and I don't know what you're going to write on, but we got those little white notebooks in our little goodie bags.
And if you have your white notebook out, you are it.
We'll give you 20 minutes. So we'll talk about this for 20 minutes, and then we'll hear what answers you came up with. Let's find out what you talked about, what you learned, and nothing is off the table. These are closed doors. You can say things that may be unpopular or not politically correct or whatever. We want ideas. We want specific ideas, little ideas, big ideas, and questions. So, table number one.
We did not solve the world's problems, but we had a few important conversations. So some of the things we talked about were the importance of normalizing follow-up for everybody, because people who test negative think that they have no right to call you when they're struggling. People who test positive sometimes think they have no right to call you when they're struggling, because certainly there's somebody who needs you more. And so if we normalize it, everybody gets follow-up. Maybe that will help that. But we had some discussion about how we might integrate some of that, and then what happens after that one follow-up, and do you have this time of limbo where there's not really going to be a need for a while, and so do we offer them studies? Do we offer them support groups? Do we host our own support groups, or they're more social groups? Another person in our table talked about better utilizing the advocacy groups for follow-up and connection and doing surveys and support groups and things like that. And then one really bright member at our table said there's also this sense of sometimes people just need a time to be alone, like let them be. Maybe they don't need to have HD front and center in their life for a while. Maybe that's a privilege of that time that they have, which is a really important thing for us to remember.
Did she accurately cover everything you discussed? Anything get left out? All right. Table number two.
I'll try my best. All right, and then we're going to share. This is where we're going to share. So just the 3 points that I wanted to make while you were both talking is just the things that came out for me, that when somebody calls, they could be thinking about testing for a really long time. So acknowledging, a little bit like Stacy said, it took courage to pick up the phone and say, I want to get tested. Then what my job, I feel, is to say, so now I'm going to slow you down and say, did you cover and talk about those things about benefits, at least in the United States, because we do have people at the table who, or it's national health care or something like it. So in terms of thinking about informing people about benefits. Do you have life insurance? Do you have long-term care insurance? Do you have short-term or long-term disability, especially if you're an individual? Do you have adult children that even if you're tested, they might be impacted because of the information on applications for long-term care or insurance companies? Also, one of the things that I do is I make sure, whether I have my Director Hatt from Carillion Clinic or from HD Reach is that we make sure that we have a release of information for at least one person. So if I do lose contact and if that person isn't going to follow up, I do have the ability to pick up the phone and call that significant other, the testing partner, whatever you want to call them, to say, hey, I'm just checking in. I think that that would be a good idea. And then the other thing that, and this is something I think everybody should do, is when we are talking, and that would have been something in your the path that you talked about, is when you are asking them the biopsychosocial that I do, I always ask, who have you told about Huntington's disease testing and about your journey? And sometimes people say, well, once I get my results, I will let people know. And then again, I stop people to say, when you do, there's never going to be a good time, whether you're positive or negative, to have that discussion. So I encourage people to think about telling people about their HD journey and asking those other people outside of them if they want to be part of that, because it can be less scary. So that if people aren't saying, you know, I'm going to tell, I'll tell my mother, I'll tell my father, I'll tell my sister or brother who might be impacted by Huntington's disease as well. So taking off the burden from themselves and giving the control back to other people. So that was just some of the, like, the immediate things that we were talking about. And then we talked about,
one of the other things that came up in our discussion was a single point of contact. And I just brought up that even though I'm not real familiar with Huntington's disease, if anybody's gone to the doctor before, you know, we've all had that experience where the doctor comes in, you tell the doctor, okay, what's going on? So you go through this whole scenario of why you're there, and then the doctor says, oh, okay, well, I want you to see this next person. Well, that person comes in, notes aren't passed along, that person comes in and says, so what brought you in today? Now you're starting your story all over again, and that could happen potentially for 2 to 3 other people, and after a while you become a little anxious because you have to continually repeat the same thing. And I'm guessing that with this particular disease, that can get a little frustrating. It's already very stressful. It's already takes a lot of courage to even start the process, and if you have to go through this 3 or 4 times of a rendition, to me, I know if it was me, that would scare me away. So we had talked that one of the people here, they have a single point of contact, that they're the one that's the forward-facing to the patient, but they also work with others behind the scenes to help them, you know, figure out what the next steps should be. And then one of the big things that came out, no matter where their clinics were located, was education, follow-up, and support, so that the patient has all of the tools at their disposal that they can utilize whenever they feel comfortable engaging.
Does that accurately describe? Okay. All right. We got the heavyweights at this table. Holy smokes. All right.
Oh, dang, how did I get the mic? I am not. This a loud mic. So a little bit of what we talked about, kind of follows in the sense of some of the things that have already been talked about. So a lot around, you know, 2-week follow-up phone calls or different things that are also being done here. Looking at how we can just follow up with those patients that we definitely have lost that contact with, and do we give them the space between 6 months or a year to actually come back, follow up, and have the time to actually process. Also looking at how we can connect with different distractions other than just a HD support group. So at our table, we talked about this great group that has this video game connection that works through a voice and a chat app, book club that resonates well with the patients, and they feel a sense to be able to lean on each other and not have to truly focus on HD, whether they're negative or positive. And that is a great way to, you know, for the help to bridge the gap. Did I forget anything, guys?
how we can make sure that we're helping them to, if they are negative or positive, getting them into partake into enroll, looking into research, how we can also help them to become more active members in the community, whether that is joining educational event, taking on an educational event, taking on a walk, joining a board, or anything else through research. So we spent a lot of time on that. Did I forget it?
Just really quick, I thought your guys' comment about engaging the whole family was really smart, actually. And, you know, if John isn't coming in, well, maybe his daughter will bring him back in, or his sister, or something like that. So I think that's getting the whole family involved. And to do that, you have to kind of understand who's related to who, which is hard sometimes. But I think that's a smart idea. So
that's a good idea I hadn't heard before.
I'm going to be driving back to Columbus, Ohio, and getting hearing aids. So if I got anything wrong, you got correct me. I was the scribe for the group, and since they're all from Johns Hopkins, and that's a rather well-known institution, a large institution, I thought we could go through with you the way they handle the process and couple of challenges that we were talking about in this discussion. First of all, the patient calls the clinical coordinator about testing, and then the social worker will call back and have a phone call with the patient, or with the potential patient, to explain all about what would be involved and get all the information about why they want the testing. At that point, they're scheduled for the test and the neurologist visit the same day. On testing day, they have to make a 15-minute walk to an outpatient clinic to get the testing, which is a challenge in terms of just, kind of an inconvenience. At the same time, it sometimes opens up an opportunity for the person to talk more about their reasons and how they're feeling, so it's an opportunity to get to know them a little bit better. That's the upside of that. The social worker briefs, the social worker briefs the genetic counselor, and as I said, the blood is drawn that day. If it's positive, they come back and ask a lot of questions. What do you need? What do you need from us? And then the coordinator at some point around the neurology appointment is also talking to the person. Have I got that right?
Yes, so it's the genetic counselor that briefs the neurologist and the social worker after the genetic counseling visit.
Right, okay.
They have to accompany them on the half-a-mile walk from
right.
where the genetic counseling office is located. And the reason why the genetic counselor can't meet with them in our clinic is for billing reasons.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because of how space is allocated at Johns Hopkins. So there's some really ridiculous bureaucracy that goes on. But our genetic counselor is lovely. She walks them through the many hallways that they need to get to our clinic. And then she briefs, I'm the social worker, she briefs me and the neurologist about how the visit went. And to your point about having to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, we try really hard to say, we talked with our colleague, these were the main points of what we got. Do we have that right? Would you like to amend any of that? Are these your top concerns today? So that way they're not having to do this all over again. And it shows them that we are talking to each other and are working as a team. So after they get their testing done, which usually takes about 4 weeks, takes less, but we don't like to have errors happen where the testing is not back in time. And when they come back, they meet with the genetic counselor who does the disclosure. Then they meet with the neurologist and me for support. Okay. Everybody's phone's going to be going off. So if it's positive, the genetic counselor and I usually try to coordinate the post-disclosure visit together. It's usually on telemedicine, and then at that point, I'm also getting their information to put on our mailing list, our email list that I maintain, so that they can get updates on our support group, clinic education days, other things like that. And I was telling our group here, this email goes out to, 300 individuals possibly, because I have families and patients on our list.
I get responses to these emails months, sometimes a year after I've sent them out. So the title of my email might be support group reminder, and here's a flyer for our education day. And 6 months, 8 months, long time later, I'll get a reply where in the subject line, it's support group reminder. And then there's 3 paragraphs about what's going on and what's happening in their family that they need help with. So I really like having people on the email list because it keeps I tell them I'm not a store. I don't send you like masses of emails with coupons. It's literally 2 or maybe twice a month, but it keeps us alive in their inbox, and I do get responses from them sometimes. So, and then our research folks that I'm sitting with also weigh in and meet with our families if they're interested in research, and that includes people who test negative because they also like to contribute to research. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over for you.
So we got to engagement a little late in the game, but just a couple of things that the neurologist will recommend an annual visit, whether or not they're symptomatic, to try to keep them in the fold. And then you were saying that the big challenge is trying to keep them engaged before there's a crisis, which is what we've talked about. But the ways of doing that, just the warm handoff, the email. The giving them all kinds of resources and letting them know that you have more resources to offer if they're interested, and getting them involved in the research or the things that came out, but we didn't get too far along that line yet. All right, good job.
We did not take notes, so this will.
Do you remember?
Yes, probably. So as far as predictive testing patients having ongoing contact, I would say some. We did talk about, there are some, especially now that we have like Enroll HD, and people can join that and really feel like they are, even if it's not for a need for themselves, that they're doing something. So we have found that actually has helped a lot of being able to engage the pre-symptomatic people. But there are other people who, just don't want to deal with it at that point. So, whose role is it to increase the connection? Well, one strategy that kind of try is that we encourage, like almost insist that a person have a support person with them. And often I will say to the support person, like, you're here to support, but we also want you to know you can reach out to us. Like that it doesn't have to be the person who tests positive. You're the support person. We're all in agreement right now that we can talk, so you can reach out and make sure that they have the phone number. That, even though we say that, it haven't happened too many times that a person's taken us up on it. But that was one of the strategies that we're thinking about. I like your email kind of suggestion, because like, how do you connect the person in? Unfortunately, at our institution, they are very nervous about using email, especially if it's to do with like, it's about Huntington's in it, or, like there's all these kind of clause, like you can do it to book an appointment, but not providing information, so it can be a bit awkward. But I think that's one of the things we said, that if there was some way that you could kind of engage a little more passively, but so they know who to reach out to, because do they remember 5 years from now, 6 years, and luckily I've been there a long time, so if they called my number, they would get me, but some counselors are not there anymore, and then they could, who knows who they're gonna get, could be a whole nother department by that point, that extension. So I do like some idea. I don't know if the rest of the table had more, because we didn't take the notes. So I may have missed something.
Good. All right. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Table number 6.
I'm taking good notes. Thank you, everybody, by the way.
This is mostly about how it goes how I do it. Almost all of our predictive testing patients who test positive do stay connected in the clinic. I present that as like part of the follow-up, part of the plan. Let me take a step back. I do most of the orientation to how everything is going to go. We don't have the resources to have someone do the phone conversation beforehand, so people get scheduled in clinic. I meet them, I tell them, I confirm you don't have symptoms, okay, then this is how it's gonna go. And usually in that initial kind of approach, I try to explain or at least present, if you do test positive, I'd like to follow you at least once a year, so they're kind of prepared for that. When they come back for their test results after the testing, I again say, I'd like to, one of the questions is often, what are the next steps, where to go from here? And again, I'd like to see you at least once a year. I'm lucky enough to have capacity to do that. Sometimes if there's people I'm a little bit more worried about or having, seem to be taking it a little bit harder, I might say, can I see you back in 3-6 months, depending on how they're doing. And so that works pretty well. Most of the patients do still come. That was asked, what's my dropout rate? I don't actually know. I know one person did not schedule the appointment, did not come back, but I think other than that, most people do. I haven't had anybody, refuse to make an appointment, and we make the appointment there, and they leave with that next annual appointment. But again, I know not everybody has the capacity to do that. I think as far as whose role it is to increase that connection, I think depends on the institution and the resources each institution has, because that varies very much from place to place, and kind of, wherever you can get it is good. Some of the specific strategies that, again, we use is some places have the coordinators for, like Enroll HD, they are part of the clinic when their patients are coming in getting predictive testing, and as long as they're doing okay, they get that kind of offered to them there at the initial visit. Another thing I do is I kind of try to, again, depending on how the person's doing, try to gauge their interest in research, talk about Enroll, but also I recommend HD Trial Finder, and that way they can have a much broader exposure to studies than just through our center. Did I forget anything? Okay.
Good job. Right. It's only getting better as we move through the tables. So table number 7.
I too did not take notes, but I've been listening. It's really fascinating. So I'll try to mention things that I think we talked about that I haven't heard. One was it's quite different at different centers because of institutional constraints, workflow. I would say, you guys are well known, but maximalist approach, one that I've been able to do before, but I've also worked places with a minimalist approach because there simply aren't the same level of personnel. And even to the details that we were discussing, can you put a manual hold on release of results or not? And so Kelly has results come directly to her because that's the only way. So the details of how to get it done, I think, are quite different place to place. And so the broader, and even if we're like, I love what you just said, the way you do it, but you simply can't implement the same thing at different institutions. So starting to think about like the bigger picture, like the broader concepts of what's key, so that the implementation can be different. We talked a little bit about how much follow-up we do offer people and what may lead people to take us up on that or not. And there's certainly a population of people who can get their test result, and then it's just anything else after that is just too much for a while. Even if they've already been in Enroll, we heard, and they get the test results, they're like, I need to take a break from all this for a while. So acknowledging that population is there, and how to recognize they need that space, but then maybe figure out how to get it back around. One of the things that I thought a lot about listening to people at this table and also the rest of you all so far, we're very fortunate in that my boss recruited me to make a neurogenetics program. It has a really strong support for faculty genetic counselors and genetic testing and all these resources. That means we're seeing a lot of people for predictive testing from across the state and surrounding states who have no intention of getting any of their other clinical care with us. But what they're home places do not have is a genetic counselor. And the other thing that their home place probably doesn't have is psychiatry and psychology, which we do also have some of, the psychiatry at least. So we have people who are coming to us who don't want to see us for anything else because they've got it all taken care of, and they also don't want to drive 4 hours one way for anything else. And they also can't do telehealth because they're in the mountains, whatever. How to track those people who aren't going to come back to clinic when they get symptomatic. Not because they don't want care, but because that's just not how it's going to roll for them. And then finally, I don't have somebody whose funded job it is to track those people, to keep our boutique clinic database and to reach out to people like that who may be on their journey towards stage 2, or maybe 2 years from now, they'll be thinking about a clinical trial. How do I get the funding to have my wonderful coordinator, to have the genetic counselor, to have a genetic counselor assistant? That's a tough one, and it's also something that we're all kind of, at least at this table, kind of making that up as we go along a little bit. Yeah.
On the brighter side, they're all pointing fingers at each other. This is hard because I play doctor on TV. Not everyone. Okay, so sitting here with some really bright folks from Iowa and from Beth Israel, Deaconess Medical Center. So what I don't know if we don't have time to share everything that everyone talked about. Everything seems kind of similar with regardless if people test negative or positive, you kind of still want to stay in touch with them and be there to offer them ongoing support and care. I think the one thing that I heard from this group that I think maybe Claudia just mentioned it, was it's actually the people with the gene positive that, they are coming in, let's say routinely, but as they worsen, then they don't come back. Like it gets a little more challenging at that point, and I don't know if we had an answer to that, but some of the other things we talked about were that, so what I liked that Sam mentioned is that when someone tests positive, they get a call 1 week post test result to set up an in-clinic visit 1 month later, and that they get to set their own agenda for what they really want out of that visit. So that sounded unique, whether that's something like, how do I tell my family, how do I tell my kids, what research can I participate in, what kind of clinical care plan will we have? And then, just trying to encourage that ongoing visit every 6 months or a check-in, maybe annually. Some never come back until there's issues, right? So everyone's kind of already hit that. Talked about challenges with electronic medical records and that level of complexity with sharing medical family history and not wanting that in their medical record because now it's going to be in their kid's medical record and that sort of thing. I didn't hear anyone really talk about the connection between people, place, the genetic testing is performed, and where people get their care. Both of these folks say their research and their care clinics are heavily integrated. But you do the research in a separate space. Sam, do you have anything else you want to? Maybe we talked a little bit about what I didn't hear was the predictive, the pre-implantation determination type of counseling. If somebody wants that, they still might not want to come in for a visit. They just come in specifically for that.
Yeah, obviously that's a different kind of focus in genetic testing visit. The other thing that we talked about was, I think some of what we're talking about as a group here, we all do research, that's why we're here, but we get referrals from people in the community that they were tested in the community and then sent to us because we're the experts in some way, so that's a different pathway and sometimes a different interaction with those patients and family members.
The final answer comes from Vanderbilt.
I just have a quick thing for Isabel. Shares our answers. It would hurt my soul if I didn't give a shameless plug to the Equitable Access and Outcomes Task Force that I'm the co-chair for, and that we're going to start up, and we'll probably have a first meeting in next month, but I just kind of want to challenge you all for all of these issues that we've been talking about and how to integrate that into the ones that we can't access, the minorities, the ones who can't even come to a doctor visit, the ones that are we don't have data for. For example, Dom in the back, her clinic has more African Americans with HD than I've ever heard of. I've met someone from Australia. She's dealing with Aboriginal HD patients, and she has a really hard time getting to them because of just the barriers in the different Aboriginal regions. We have started to see more minority patients in our clinics as well, and there's a barrier of there's a genetic testing with cultural beliefs and things like that, but also with them telling their families, them wanting to participate in research, there's all these different barriers that we all need to also think about in addition. So just, anyways.
Go Danielle. So something that we focus a lot of our conversation on is the idea of whole family research, and it's a huge part of our ability to bring families back in. I think we have so much research going on at Vanderbilt, and we have a great team that works really closely together. I am a coordinator, and a majority of our table is coordinators, so I think that really emphasizing we are so privileged as coordinators to spend so much time with families and what can feel so less formal to them than what it feels like to go see a physician. So maintaining relationships with all family members. And I think someone mentioned it earlier about maybe we lose someone for a little bit, but we're seeing their other family members still coming in, and maybe one day that they'll bring that other member back in. So keeping touch with them in any way or any capacity that we can. We also talked about going to the clinic, and I think someone else mentioned this too, and just being able to give them a face to who's contacting them. Obviously, if they're interested in research, there's a lot of times where our patients are really excited because they feel more connected to that one person that they met the first time that they came to clinic. So we also talked about maybe adding kind of somewhere where we can all understand and let each other know who feels relatively close with that family, and so when we're contacting them, they're not getting multiple different phone numbers that are calling them, instead of looking for the one person that they had originally connected with and feel comfortable with. So just making sure that we're maintaining those relationships.
Cool. What a wonderful. How about you guys give yourselves a round of applause? This is really good.
Thank you.
And what time is it?
I have pages of notes here, so thank you guys
We have 6 minutes for a few other comments.
I think what things that I just forgot to say out loud, to me the elephant in the room is, are we even the right people to be talking about this, right? Do I have the right people on my team now to handle this? And we were talking amongst ourselves, do you have the neurologist follow up? Do you have a genetic counselor call people? Maybe what we're really talking about on the clinical care side is visits with an actual psychologist or a trained counselor to just give the person the space to unpack their reactions to whatever the test result was, and to explore if they have symptoms, or if they have no symptoms but they're just struggling with how to even frame in their own head engagement or not engagement, or what's driving those things. I feel like it's doing a disservice to them to say, okay, maybe I should open up on my schedule to make sure they have the opportunity to come back and see me in 6 months or in a year. I am a craptastic trained counselor because I am absolutely not trained, and I'm super bad at it. So I'm a neurologist and neuroscientist instead. So are we, as a research organization, I think a lot about giving the people the bandwidth and the tools they need to then be able to effectively decide to engage with being part of an experiment, and then to just have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And do I really have the right people, my clinical care team, to do that? Or do I need to think a little bit outside of who I already have?
The answer is we all need to work together. And none of us can do this by ourselves. The patients can't do it by themselves. A family unit can't do it by himself. You can't do all the care. Amy Hellman is just, doing it all by herself in Nebraska. It's just amazing. But this is her support group. You really can't do it by yourself. Thank God we have people from pharma companies and HDSA and who else is here right now? It's going to take all of us working together. Claudia, it doesn't have to be you seeing the patient every time. That may be exactly the wrong person to see the patient. Maybe it would be the social worker, the genetic counselor, or maybe it would be connect with HDO or HDSA or somebody in the community creates an HD book club and they go to the book club. So yeah, we do not have to do this by ourselves. And part of this, hopefully by talking to each other, you now have a new friend. You can phone a friend. Or if you're testing somebody in North Carolina who lives in South Carolina and they're never going to come back there, maybe you contact the medical clinic in South Carolina to sort of help hand off. So that's my answer to am I the right person? No, I'm not the right person to do all of this by myself.
None of us are. Yeah.
None of us are.
This is the slide that Martha and I came up with. We put you guys all to work first, and then we kind of came up with this other idea about, okay, we don't make, and so a lot of you said this, we don't make it an option, right? We just sort of say, okay, when you get your results, you're going to come back and you're going to see us. I've been kind of soft and mushy about that in the past, and she admitted she had been too. When do we talk about research? I'm not going to talk to somebody about research that's hysterical just getting their results. But at the follow-up visit, when I'm calling them a month later, maybe that's the time. Thinking about anosognosia and how do we deal with our patients who just think they're fine, and those kinds of issues. Someone suggested maybe thinking about at the beginning when we have that follow-up call, give people their CAP score. Let them know, okay, you're going to need this if you want to, and talk to them about Trial Finder. Give them flyers. Have the research coordinator sitting in clinic to be able to have a face-to-face. That's important at our clinic at UC Davis too. All the support groups, HSG, HDO. I love the book club and what was the other one besides the book club? Just video games, non-threatening, non-HD social kind of events, hoopathons, those kinds of things that can be ways to stay connected. And then signing them up for, HD Buzz. And then I think it was Johns Hopkins that had like an email thing. I thought that was awesome, to be able to, Lisa does that at UC Davis too.
Is there anything else? Is there another slide? Your suggestions and questions here. Should we modify our testing process? Now, the other thing that's, I think, coming in neurology in general, I know it's a word that Daniel uses sometimes, is brain health. And nobody said that, but I always say, in neurology, my entire career, we wait and wait and wait and wait, and then this 70-year-old grandma has a stroke, and there they are in the hospital with a stroke, and you say, you should have treated your blood pressure and your diabetes and quit smoking and cholesterol and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I never met you until today, but there you are with a stroke. And there's 4 children standing around the bedside, and whose ears are pricking up, I hope, are those 4 children saying, oh, cholesterol, blood pressure, smoking, do you think maybe I would have a lesser chance of having a stroke if I dealt with those things now at age 30? We need to maybe start thinking in that way. I think we haven't aggressively done that in the neurodegenerative disease world because the things we would have to offer are, eat right and exercise, and it just sounds like the same blah, 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 blah that we tell everybody. But I think you could phrase it to say specifically because you have a brain under stress, you have the Huntington gene. It's going to declare itself at some point. now is a perfect time when you're feeling good to double down, go to the gym, eat right, deal with stress. Anybody feeling stressed this week? Anybody feeling anxious since Tuesday? Deal with stress, and maybe we need to start really, that would be the other thing you would do at that 3-month appointment, is to say, let's really focus on brain health. And just maybe your physical therapist or your OT or your psychologist or your social worker would have bright ideas about that. And maybe we can get our support groups, not just sitting around talking about how miserable everything is, but let's do a little yoga. So it's 4:15. I think we have to quit. Was this helpful? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you all so much. It was great to interact with all of you.